guys, welcome back to What Would They Listen To, a segment where I talk about characters or teams of characters that I basically look at a character and try to figure out what kind of music would it be in their iPod if you ever saw their playlists. So obviously, for this segment, I'm talking about another great Marvel team, the X-Men. Now, the X-Men obviously have a huge team, so I'm obviously not going to be able to think of all the X-Men's team music right off the bat. So the X-Men are the X-Men are going to be. I'm only going to do some X-Men, probably the main X-Men, the original 5, and then move and maybe do some others from like Nightcrawler and Wolverine as well. But I'm going to start off with the original 5, and maybe if I can think of anything else, or we'll just see how this plays out, is what I'm trying to say. Anyway, so let's get this started. Starting off with, of course, leader of the X-Men, Cyclops. Now, Cyclops is a little difficult because he's always been the straight man. He's always been the great big hero of, the savior, the leader of the mutant race with Charles Xavier out. I'll talk about Xavier in a bit, but I want to talk about the first 5 X-Men, and then I'll move on to the leader. Anyway, so getting back to Cyclops. Cyclops, I could see. It's really hard to see what would be on his list. I could see him as for some reason, Cyclops strikes me as a Bob Dylan fan. I don't know why, but I can definitely see a lot of Bob Dylan on Scott's his playlist, more or less. I can see a lot of it on his iPod. Also with that, I could see like Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, a lot of 70s stuff. I could see him definitely enjoying a lot of the 70s music. I could even see him enjoying a lot of 70s-esque music, and some 80s too. I could see him enjoying. I could see him enjoying. Actually, I could see him as a Depeche Mode fan. For some reason, Cyclops strikes me as a Depeche Mode fan. I could see him listening to a lot of Depeche Mode as well. So, gotta give a lot of credit for that. So, definitely a lot of 70s music. I could see some Jefferson Airplane as well in there. Just throwing that out for. But that's just a few things I could see for Cyclops. Moving on to Jean. Now, what would Jean Grey have in her iPod? I could see her being also a Janis Joplin fan, also with Jefferson's Airplane. I could see her in the new years. In the newer age stuff, I could see her being a fan of maybe some Avril Lavigne. I could see her being a fan of Icon for Hire. Also a fan of. See, this is kind of difficult because Jean's another one, but I could also see her being a fan of Hendrix as well, and maybe even I could see some classical in her music. I could see her, when she's trying to concentrate and meditate. I could see Jean listening to some Mozart or Beethoven or Bach in that playlist as well when she needs to calm herself. So there's a bit of that I could see. So yeah, there's a little for Jean. Bobby Drake, Iceman. Oh boy, Iceman's gonna have a lot of interesting music. I could see him for Five for Fighting, Amberline. I could see him also a fan of Foo Fighters, 3 Days Grace, Quiet Riot. A lot of mixed music, but a lot of hard rock and some progressive. That's what I can think when I'm thinking of. Also some Weird Al. Also some Weird Al for Iceman as well, but a lot of some hard, not a lot of heavy metal. Maybe some Metallica here and there, but I don't see him going too deep into some like new age screamo metal. More like your classic metal all the way to the 80s and 90s thrash metal. That's about it for what I can see for Iceman in terms of, but mostly I could see him being a fan of progressive rock. That's what I'm trying to get at for the most part. So. That's a bit for Bobby. Moving on to Hank McCoy, Beast, my favorite X-Man. Now, what would my favorite X-Man listen to? He has commented that he does love classical music, so that's a given. So, classical music. I could also see him being a fan of maybe, again, 70s music. I could see him being a fan of Again, Joplin, a lot of... Because I know I'm kind of bringing that up for a lot of the X-Men, but that's what I could honestly see them listening to. They kind of look like those kind of fans. Not trying to stereotype here, but they look like they would just be sitting down and enjoying, like, Don't You Want Somebody to Love, or something like that, or Foxy Lady. Good God, I have this image now of Cyclops listening to Foxy Lady while singing it to Jean half-heartedly. Ugh, I don't know if that... No, that's creepy. That's creepy. Anyway, getting back to other things. Beast, again, a lot of classical music, and maybe some disco. Yeah, I remember somewhere reading in a comic that he has a soft spot for disco here and there. So maybe some disco. I'm just saying. So Angel also looks like like he'd be a fan of something like the Bee Gees and Peter Frampton. A lot of Frampton, and maybe I could also see him listening to Genesis and Phil Collins. I could see him as a fan of Genesis and Phil Collins solo stuff. I could see him also Angel as a fan of again some Five for Fighting, Breaking Benjamin, a lot of those kind of music. The same kind of thing you would see with Iceman for the most part. So yeah, moving on to Xavier. Xavier is, again, another guy who would enjoy a lot of classical, but I could see him also sitting down and enjoying, just a lot of classical. The Professor doesn't really strike me as a fan of anything with a guitar in it, so yeah. Again, a lot of classical, maybe, and some opera. Yeah, definitely some opera from some Andrew Lloyd Webber stuff. Definitely I could see him listening to Les Mis. Wait, was it Weber who made Les Mis? I want to say yes, but I could be wrong. But anyway, I could definitely see him listening to, like, Cats. Not Cats! I tell you that. Jesus Christ Superstar and, the Phantom of the Opera. Professor Xavier being a fan of that. So, yeah. So I'm going to do a few more X-Men. Moving on to the other group, the second team of X-Men after that. So I'm going to kick things off, moving on to that with, of course, Wolverine. What would Wolverine listen to? Wolverine strikes me dead on as a Johnny Cash fan. I could definitely see him sitting back with a glass of whiskey and a cigar in one hand, listening to Johnny Cash's Hurt, as he's just sitting alone and being all somber and stoic as he's listening to that music and just drinking and smoking. Just sitting alone in there, listening to that in a bar. I could see him also listening to a lot of classic Johnny Cash and the newer stuff. Paraphrasing, of course, for Cash. Among other things, for Wolverine, I could see him a lot of classic country. I know he's Canadian and all that, but he strikes me as a classic country guy. You'd probably be thinking like stuff like 3 Days Grace and stuff like that. I don't think Wolverine would really enjoy hard rock music. He'd be like, "Oh, that's just about a bunch of noise, bub." That was a terrible Wolverine impression, but yeah, it kind of serves the point. But I don't think Wolverine would be a kind of a hard rock fan. He'd be more like listening to, music. Like, I could see Wolverine listening to Leonard Skinner, honestly. I could see Logan as a Leonard Skinner fan. I could see him also listening to a lot... The closest hard rock music I could see Wolverine listening to is a band called Clutch. That's about the closest you're going to see with hard rock music for Wolverine. I could definitely see him listening to some Clutch. Especially like Burning Beard or The Regulator. Definitely those kind of songs would be on Logan's iPod. So yeah, let's move on to Nightcrawler now. What would Kurt have on his music? Before anyone makes the joke, I don't think he would have Rammstein on his... I don't think he would really have Rammstein on his iPod. Yes, yeah, before anyone made that joke for Nightcrawler because he's German. But, however, I do see him listening to a lot of I could see him as a Christian rock kind of guy. I could see him enjoying like Skillet and stuff like that. He is a religious person, and I think he would have. And he doesn't strike me as a hard rock kind of person, but not like screamo. So definitely you could see stuff like Skillet, Jars of Clay, Red, Demon. Probably not Demon Hunter, but We As Human. Those kind of Christian rock stuff. Maybe even some Creed. That'd probably be as hard as he goes with Creed. So there's that. With Kurt also I could see him being a fan of maybe being a fan of. I could see him also being a fan. For some reason, I could see Kurt listening to Living Color. I don't know why, but I could see him listening to Cult of Personality in his room. I could see that him turning on Cult of Personality and just listening to it. So yeah. So who else have we got? Colossus. Let's talk about Colossus. Colossus would be interesting. I don't know. Because the thing is like, I don't... Colossus is another difficult character. I know he would definitely be a fan of music, but it's hard to determine what kind of music I could see him listening to. Probably not pop. I'm going to take that off, and not heavy metal. Again, I'm taking that pun off the table. I really don't know for Colossus. I can't really just see what kind of music Colossus could be listening to. So, yeah, I love Colossus, but I don't know what he'd be listening to. I would talk about Sunfire and Thunderbird, but the thing is that those Sunfire, I don't think, is kind of too stoic to be listening to music, so I'm going to skip him, and Thunderbird passed away in the second mission, so yeah. However, let's talk about a few more X-Men and popular X-Men. Jubilee. Jubilee, straight up Avril Lavigne fan, I could even see her listening to Lady Gaga. I could see her listening to, also listening to One Republic. I could see her listening to, maybe some, Pink and Nicki Minaj, or however you say the name, or whatever. I could also see her being a fan of, I could see her going into some rock music like Chris Daltrey and, Breaking Benjamin in there. I could see that definitely in Jubilee's iPod. Nothing really gothic, even though she's a vampire. Although I could see her listening to Evanescence, but that's really about it. So yeah. So let's see. I don't want to talk about every. See, here's the thing. I don't want to talk about every single X-Men in the team, because I want to. Obviously, I couldn't do that, and I'd burn myself out. So, and it'd be nice to save some and come back to the X-Men. So, Gambit. What would Gambit listen to? I could definitely see Gambit listening to like the Allman Brothers, the Grateful Dead, and Leonard Skinner. A lot of Southern rock. Wait, is Grateful Dead main? Did they form in the South? I can't remember. But I could regardless, for some reason, Remy strikes me as a fan of listening to a lot of Grateful Dead songs as he's, just listening to some Grateful Dead. I could see that. I could also see him being a fan of, I could see him listening to some Kansas and Journey. Yeah, I could honestly see Gambit listening to Kansas and Journey. And, yeah, more or less. And a lot of, like, country music, for the most part. That's also a thing, getting on to Rogue real quick. Rogue would be a straight-up country fan. I could see her listening to, like, Tim McGraw, Kenny Chesney, Luke Bryan, Taylor Swift. Well, maybe. Taylor Swift's a maybe. I'm going to put her in the maybe pile for Rogue. I could see her on Jubilee, because Jubilee would probably be taking little pieces of genre of her music in any case. So, Rogue, a lot of country. I mean straight-up country. Not just, like, current country. I could see her, again, listening to Conway Twitty, and Johnny Cash, and a lot of classic country, but mixed in with, and some classic and current Reba McEntire. in Rogue's playlist, more or less. So yeah, I guess I'll talk about one more. Kitty Pryde. Kitty Pryde. I know I talked about Jubilee, so yeah. I guess, yeah, Kitty Pryde would be a nice way to end this. Kitty, a lot with, like I was saying with Jubilee, a lot of the same music you could see listening to, for her, and transition that to Jubilee, and transition that to Kitty Pryde. A lot of, I think Kitty Pryde would be a great mix of pop and a lot of current country in her music. I could see a lot of that in her playlist. I could see a lot of, you could skip from Justin Timberlake and then find Luke Bryan or Garth Brooks following right after that with Kitty. So that's more or less what I see, but anyway, guys, that is just my general opinion on this list. Again, I talk about a lot more X-Men, but I really don't want to burn myself out on this, because this is, the X-Men obviously have a huge team. They have more, I think there's more X-Men than Avengers sometimes, but that's just how I see it. And again, I could be totally wrong, but we don't really know what the X-Men would listen to. The comics don't really delve deep much into their musical, musical repertoire. So, yeah, I'm just kind of spitballing here and just, giving my general thoughts. I just figured this would be a fun little thing, so yeah. Anyway, guys, so I really want to know, what do you think the X-Men would listen to if you were to go into their iPods right now? What do you think you would find for the X-Men? Not just the X-Men I talked about, but any X-Men in mind. So yeah, and I will probably return to the X-Men in the future with this segment, like I did when I was talking about Justice League and Avengers as well. So yeah. Anyway, guys, hope you guys enjoyed this segment, and yeah, once again, I can't wait to see what you guys come up with for what do you think the X-Men would listen to. Anyway, I'm out.